Here's a very good race going on. Scott Pruitt, followed closely by Willie T. Ribbs, and then right behind Willie T. is Wally Dallenbach Jr. These three cars right here racing for position.
Number 9, Dallenbach through turn 1 and into the turn number 2. And young Wally Dallenbach out of Basalt, Colorado is making a name for himself.
Meet the 1992 Whistler Team of Champions.
Might want to do the inside too, Max. I got another job for you when you're done with the windshield.
Max, if he says he wants his feet rubbed, you don't have to do that.
Here's the green. Now we're going to watch to see if Wally Dallenbach can take second. He's already passed Jimmy Spencer as they head for one, and now Roush is first and second.
That now brings us to Wally Dallenbach. What you can see, what really impresses me is how smooth Wally is. You see there's not a lot of extra movement with his hands. All that racing experience on different types of tracks and different types of surfaces, I think, has really helped him.
As they continue to shuffle the positions in the back of the field here at Talladega. Everybody looking for the line. Right now is Wally Dallenbach, who has taken the lead of the race.
Look at all these cars trying to get a lap.
Whoa, and Dallenbach gets hit from behind and spins, does a nice 360.
That is unbelievable. And the grandstand stand and give him a standing ovation. I think I will. Attaboy, Wally.
The three men that will take you from the green flag in Daytona to the checkered flag in Atlanta. Alan Bestwick, Betty Parsons, and Wally Dallenbach.
So, I mean, we'll start right there. So, as Mark said, we were not alive in the 1980s. We're brave enough to say that, and we're brave enough to say basically everything we've seen from you in IMSA GTO and Trans Am days have been like VHS tapes on YouTube. So tell us what it was like first off in Trans Am, because that's where your career on the pro side really like took a start from what we can find.
Well, first of all, thanks for making me feel like I'm 100 years old. But the Trans Am racing back when I got involved in it was awesome. And you got to understand, back then there was huge manufacturer support in road racing, and that's really how I got anywhere in motor racing. But the first I got 2 Trans Am rides, I believe it was in '83, by a guy named Eddie Walks, who helped me in my career, with a guy named Gordy Off the Dollar, 2 Pontiacs, and we raced at Riverside in Vegas. And I ran good in both races, like top 4 both races. And man, I was hooked. I had just gotten off 2 years of racing NASCAR modifieds on the East Coast, and we were kind of looking for something to do. So in '84, we had some help from Jim Truman, Red Roof Inns, PPG Industries, Bill Simpson, Simpson Safety Equipment, and we bought the Atlee cars, which Willie T. and David Hobbs were driving in the '83 season. And we ran the Trans Am season in '84 out of our place in Colorado. It was me, my sister, and my sister's boyfriend. And we ran the whole series out of a little garage in Colorado. And got Rookie of the Year, had some great finishes, actually finished higher in points than the factory Chevrolet team. And I got a tryout with Ford at the IMSA race, which was in the November of '83, I believe it was, or '84. And Willie T and I teamed up to drive in the 3-hour IMSA race at Daytona. And we won the race, and I got a contract. And I mean, it was, and that back then, guys like me we had actually opportunities, because there was factories looking for young drivers to sign to contracts. It's so much different now. It's not even close. So I ran the '85 season with the Roush Protofab team, and I was running IMSA and Trans Am that year. I was doing both series. We won the 24 Hours Daytona, we won Sebring, we won a bunch of races in IMSA, and I won the Trans Am Championship. But I mean, the racing was so much fun, because it was just an hour, just flat out, no pit stops, going for it. You had Pontiac, Porsche, Chevrolet, Ford, Nissan, all had factory teams back then. And each factory team had at least two drivers, some 3. And then you had a lot of privateers that were pretty damn good in that series. So the racing was great. I mean, it was fun, hard racing. And I got to do that for a few years in Trans Am, and it put me on the map. It led me to a NASCAR ride in Atlanta with Junie Dunleavy. Ford, asked me, said, "Hey, would you like to try NASCAR?" And NASCAR was never on my radar. I came from an IndyCar family. I wanted to go IndyCar racing, and that was the direction I thought I was going to go in. But there weren't any opportunities unless you brought money, and we didn't have any. I ran the IROC series, and the IROC series really gave me a taste of the oval big car racing. And I remember when the first race was at Daytona, and you go barreling off into turn one, and you got guys like Neil Bonnet and stuff like that all around you, and I'm like, okay, this is pretty cool. I wouldn't mind trying to do this. I got an opportunity to do a race with Junie Dunleavy in Atlanta, thanks to Ford Motor Company. I realized NASCAR was not IROC. These cars were a lot harder to drive, and it was a different world. But it gave me the opportunity to be a NASCAR. After I ran some races with Junie, Roush stepped in, Keystone Beer stepped in, and I ran my first year in Cup, and that's kind of the direction I was going to go in. And a lot of people have asked me, it's like, man, if you would have stayed in road racing, you would have been the king. And I really loved the road racing thing, but I was also up for a new challenge. And the NASCAR deal was definitely a big challenge. And that's kind of how the transition happened. I mean, I got to NASCAR because of Ford Motor Company. I was a factory driver for them, and they gave me an opportunity to try out in the Cup Series.
So going back to Trans Am, though, or well, actually IROC. So you mentioned IROC. So you raced IROC in '87, and was that really like the point where you're like, oh, I think I could probably try NASCAR? Because we've heard that from other people, from Robbie Gordon and people who are like, oh, I ran Rel at IROC, so I'm going to NASCAR. And obviously you said it was much more difficult. Like, explain the differences for people who wouldn't know, like the differences between the two cars.
Well, the IROC cars, I'm shooting off the cuff here. I doubt they had the horsepower the Cup cars had. They definitely were better aerodynamically than the Cup cars. So the cars handled well. The ovals that we ran were Daytona and Michigan that year. We ran Watkins Glen in Mid-Ohio. And so the cars were fairly easy to drive because they were set up so good. They were very predictable, and they weren't, really scary to drive. You get in a Cup car, and all of a sudden you add all that extra horsepower, and the cars were, not only are you on the track with 11 other really good drivers, now you're on the track with 39 really good drivers. And it's definitely, the faster racetracks I was a lot more comfortable with than the Bristols and the Richmonds and the Martinsvilles, because, the short track stuff really wasn't my background. My background was really, with the exception of running 2 years in NASCAR modifieds, my background was road racing. So I was more comfortable at the super speedways than I was on the short tracks. And it took a long time to adapt to the way they were driving those cars, which, I would go in as deep as you possibly could go, get on the brakes hard, jump on the throttle hard, which is a road racing, technique. It doesn't work on a short track. And it took me a long time to figure out how to roll a car in and all that, let the car just roll in, pick up the throttle 3/4 away through the corner instead of trying to jump on the throttle halfway through the corner and get the car sideways and, feeling like an idiot. So there was a big difference. That was the biggest difference, was the cars were a lot faster. They were harder to drive, and there was a lot more people on the racetrack that were pretty damn good.
So it's interesting. You got to this point where you're driving the 16 car, Keystone, like big corporate sponsor on the car, big team with Roush Racing. What was that transition like going to the first full-time season? Did you get a lot of testing as well to acclimate, or?
No, I didn't. We really didn't get any more testing than anybody else got. It was a little bit of a tough deal. I mean, Jack Roush was definitely behind me. Ford Motor Company was definitely behind me. I don't believe the race team was 100% behind me. You know, Mark Martin was my teammate. They had their deal going. It was going pretty good. And now all of a sudden you throw this road racer in the mix, and it's a second car. And you know, I always had the feeling that I felt like an outsider there. You know, not from my guys and my team. My guys and my team busted their butt as hard as anybody. But I feel like Mark's side of the deal, we were just kind of a pain in the neck. And Mark and I got along great. I never had an issue with Mark. Mark, and I won the 24 Hours Daytona together, and we did some road racing stuff together. So there was never any problem with Mark, and I had a ton of respect for him. But I just felt like we were the third wheel there for a while, just because we kind of disrupted their party a little bit.
Yeah, I remember Dale Earnhardt saying the same thing when Childress added Mike Skinner in the 31 car. How it was kind of the same deal. Like, well, this is our team, and now there's this other dynamic. But you talk about teammates, and so you probably don't know this about me, but because we just met. But I'm the biggest Robbie Gordon fan in the world. I love Robbie Gordon. I know you can say a lot of things about the guy, but his determination as a race car driver, unbelievable. What was it like? Do you have like Robbie Gordon as your teammate? Do you have any Robbie stories? Like, there's got to be some crazy Robbie stories.
Yeah, well, Robbie kind of came in to the road racing thing really a little bit after I left. But Robbie and I won the 24 Hours together. We did some racing together. I can tell you, and if you watched Uppity, and you heard the conversation with Willie and I in the rental cars, same thing with Robbie Gordon. There's some stuff that went on that was just absolutely insane.
Stuff you wouldn't condone now.
Yeah, we'd be in jail. There was a lot more we could get away with back then. But, Robbie was a really fierce competitor. And, again, we had a lot of respect for each other, and we always got along. It was always him against me or me against him, whether it was in, the little road racing we did together or even on the Cup side. But, I have a tremendous amount of respect for Robbie and everything he's jumped in, and he's very versatile. I was kind of the same way. I've driven everything you can absolutely possibly drive just because I loved it. And Robbie was the same thing. I mean, it didn't matter what it was. He would get in it and he would drive it hard. So, but Robbie and I had some good races, and we had some good races together. Like I said, we won some races together in IMSA, and it was a lot of fun.
So there's this interesting point in your Cup career that I've always wanted to ask you about, and that was when you were driving for Bud Moore in the number 15 car. Now, in '96, you had a top 5 finish at Sonoma. It was a 3rd place finish. It was an amazing run. But my question was, your background is road racing. What development or implications did you have with the teams in developing left and right hand chassis, especially throughout the 90s, as like the NASCARs became more dynamic, especially on the road courses?
Well, it's funny because, when I got into Cup racing, I remember even with the Roush team, it was like, we go to Martinsville, and the brakes wouldn't last. I mean, and I couldn't understand it. I'm like, they're like, well, you got to lift at the start-finish line after about 10 laps. And I'm like, why not just put better brakes on these things? It was crazy. It was like, there's better stuff out there. Why don't we have hoses and cooling to our brakes? And why don't we have bigger rotors? And, the mentality on some of these race teams was, well, we've always done it this way, which was, for somebody like me that came up in road racing, we were always pushing the envelope. We were trying stuff. We were making better stuff. We were messing with, under trays. And it was fun because it was something that we could play with. So when we got to Bud Moore's deal, we went and tested at Sonoma. And all I asked them, I said, listen, just give me a day or two to work on shocks. Let me bring in a shock guy and just let me do my thing for a day or two. And they're like, yeah, no problem. So we went up there, and I had a buddy of mine, Mark Wida, Mark Wida was on Dan Gurney's team when I drive the MCGTU car in 1983. So Mark and I have been friends for a long time. Long story short, Mark came up and worked with me, and we got that thing dialed in. And we made a believer out of how important shocks are to Bud Moore. Because those guys, you know, they would throw in anything that was silver and shiny. And, you know, we were building the shocks, and we were doing different valvings and different everything. That car hauled at Sonoma. And, you know, unfortunately, our pit stops kind of were not the greatest at that time. So we always, you know, whenever I came in, we lost spots. You know, we lost a few spots in the pits. And I mean, those guys were busting their butts, but it wasn't like it is today, where we had a professional crew. We had, you know, volunteers that came in and did our pit stops, but the car was awesome. It was really, really good. And I think that was a turning point with those guys at Bud Moore, to where it's like, hey, listen, you know, maybe we should do some more of this. I had a great year with Bud Moore. I'm sorry it didn't go on. We should have won a couple of races that year. And probably certainly one of my top two favorite teams I drove for in Cup, because, you know, the cars were good. The engines were pretty good. And, you know, we ran really well for the budget that we had to run on compared to everybody else. And I'm sorry it didn't continue, but it was one of those deals where Hayes Modems was about to go under. And I had an opportunity to do something with Felix, and I had to make that decision. And it was the right decision, because ultimately Hayes Modems did go away, and that was our sponsor deal.
The whole .com bubble, which was crazy, because that sponsor came on like right during Speed Weeks. So you had a blank car during Speed Weeks, and then you got that Hayes Modem all white car into the top 10 and was a contender all through the Daytona 500. There was another.
Yeah, they were on for a one race deal. And then after they came on for Daytona, and it was a one race deal. I didn't have a future after Daytona 500 with Bud Moore. What? It was it. So we went to Daytona, and, you know, we ran good. I think we finished 6th in the 500. And Hayes Modem said, hey, we're in for the year. So that's how it was. We went down there not knowing that we were going to the second race.
That's
no pressure.
So talk about no pressure going into 97. So you have this opportunity with Felix, come on board with his team. He's got Robbie Gordon coming on.
Robbie Gordon's teammate again, now in Cup.
Again, going to Chevrolets. Now, how did this deal work out? Because, I mean, we're trying to figure out this a little bit, because your driving schedule was a little up and down for Felix during 97. So explain that situation.
So we talked about, again, this was First Union Bank was going to sponsor us, but they only had so much money. So what we decided is, okay, let's run a limited schedule. We'll run the big tracks and the road courses and stuff. And, you know, let's concentrate on, you know, running good at these tracks, and then see where it goes for the following year. So we were running good. I mean, I had a good little team. We weren't even in the same building as Robbie at that time. We were across the street down in the woods. And, you know, they kind of left us to do what we wanted to do. And it was working out really well, actually too well. Because First Union was seeing the results and saying, hey, these guys are running pretty good. We want to run the full season. So what they did was, First Union went to Felix and said, listen, we want Wally to run the full schedule from here on out. And I don't know when it started, but it was early in the year, maybe halfway through the year. The problem was we weren't prepared to run the full season. We didn't have short track cars. We didn't have the people. We didn't have the infrastructure. And I look back at it now, hey, listen, I wanted to run the full schedule. That's why I did it. I'm like, yeah, hey, more racing, absolutely. I look back on it now, and I wish we wouldn't have done that. I wish we would have stuck to our guns, because once we started to run the full season, it was a cluster. Because so much was dumped on us at the last minute. And it's like, okay, we're going to Richmond in 3 weeks. But we didn't even have a car for Richmond. And it put a lot of pressure on my guys, and it really kind of hampered our performance, I think. We were all gung-ho about it, and obviously excited to run the rest of the year. I look back on it, and I would have done it differently. I would have just said, hey, we'll do it the next year, but we need to stick with what we're doing. Because we just, it just got, it's like somebody coming to you, 2 weeks before Daytona and saying, hey, you guys are running the full season. Okay. It's hard to do.
I was going to ask you, Wally, about 1995. So 95, you're not really in Cup or anything. And we were trying to find what you were doing that year, and we didn't really find anything other than that race with Bill Davis at Watkins Glen, where you finished second in that race to Mark Martin when he was on that ridiculous Watkins Glen tear. We have a video about that. Check it out. But yeah, so what were you up to in 95?
Well, I had a fall in that. We basically, things at Petty's weren't working out for me. There's a lot of frustration on my part, on their part, going back to doing things the old way. And I was competitive, and I was, and so it wasn't working out. So in 95, I basically was sitting out. It was one of those situations where, I didn't have anything going, and I really wasn't doing anything. I was talking to some teams, but, there was nothing done yet. And the Bill Davis thing came up, and actually probably, if nothing else, saved my career. Because, jumped in and had a really good run. And based on that is when the Bud Moore deal, happened. There was a friend of mine named Preston Miller, who was with Ford for a long, long time. He was friends with Bud, and he really went to bat for me with Bud Moore, said, hey, you should be looking at this guy. And that's how really I got the Bud Moore ride, was because of that, Watkins Glen deal.
Is there points in your career that now you look back on and it's like, wow, if that doesn't happen, then this doesn't happen. Like, it's pretty crazy when you think about it.
Yeah, there is, but the thing about it for me is, I look at everything I've done, everything I got to drive, everybody I've got to drive for. It was a blessing. I mean, I got to do something really cool in my whole career. I got to drive a lot of really cool race cars, from, Indy cars, NASCAR, Pikes Peak hill climb stuff, every kind of road racing car you could do. I really had a blast. And sure, you wish things would have worked out a little bit different, especially in my NASCAR career. I drove for Hendrick the one year, which I thought that was going places. I think we made the team a lot better. Towards the end of the year, we were top 10 finishes. The team was gelling, but Budweiser was leaving. And I know for a fact that, John Hendrick at the time, those guys were going to bat for me to come back the next year. And, a sponsor showed up, and they wanted they had another driver they were, connected to. It wasn't really the sponsor. It was the guy who put the sponsorship together, was also representing Nadu, and I was out and he was in. And, that was disappointing, because I really felt we were building something there and the cars were getting better. So, then that kind of led into the Darwin Ort fiasco, which was really my last year in Cup racing. And that was a mess. Jimmy Johnson from Hendrick, who was at Hendrick all those years, he was the one that was kind of the team manager of the team at that time. And he came to me asking me to drive for the team. And I went and drove there because of Jimmy Johnson. Jimmy lasted about 2 months, said, I can't take it anymore, and left. It was a mess. So that wasn't really, that wasn't the greatest of years, but again, I mean, you gotta take the opportunities when they come. And I always, tried to take the best opportunity that was offered me. So there's no regrets, but certainly would have liked to run a little bit longer in the Cup Series. When Ort's team folded, again, it was weeks before the Daytona 500. I'm not finding another ride. And I got bills. And that's when the TV thing came up. And somebody said, hey, NBC and TNT are trying guys out, you should give it a try. And that's how that all happened.
We'll be right back to our interview with Wally Dallenbach Jr. But first, a quick word from our partners at Blue Emu.
James, it's been beautiful weather lately, and I've been doing a lot of hiking. I've been outdoors a lot, and it's been tough because it's been nice to be outdoors, but I'm been walking through the woods and getting scratches and bug bites. Man, the bugs are really bad right now. And I have all these abrasions and just these minor little things that are bugging me. And I really wish I had something to help deal with that.
Well, dude, I'll tell you what, this is the answer. Blue Emu Lidocaine Cream. All right, this is specifically for pain relief. It provides temporary relief to any of those, minor scratches and bumps that you might have while you're hiking, but also it provides relief for minor sunburn, minor cuts, scrapes, insect bites, and minor skin irritation. All right,
that sounds like it's perfect for me.
Yeah,
it's great.
And you know what? I'm pretty sure you might have an out-of-the-box version of it, don't you?
I think I do. I think they sent me some, and yeah, it actually is right here. And I'm gonna have to throw this in my bag for next time I go hiking because it actually has this really cool applicator. It's like foam, and you just go like this on your skin. You just rub it on there, and you don't even have to. You don't even have to get your hands dirty. You don't get any cream on them. But the thing is, this cream, it's odor-free. It's not oily. You won't stink. It's great. And it has real emu oil because it is too legit to quit. And you'll have temporary relief of those little minor aches and pains.
Yeah, so if you're looking for relief from minor aches and pains and you don't want to stink, looking for easy application that can take it anywhere, go get you some Blue Emu Lidocaine Cream. Just go get it. Go get it. Take your hand, get that Blue Emu Lidocaine Cream. Just get that, but pay for it, obviously.
Yeah, don't just take it. No. Buy it. And you know what? If you buy it online, tell them that we sent you, because that would be a big help.
Yeah, we don't have a code. Just put in somewhere when you purchase and you check out that Mark and James sent you.
Now let's get back to Wally.
So, you speak about trying out because, what does that entail? Does that mean you were able to go to Connecticut and go in front of the producers for NASCAR, or did you have to send in a submission? How does trying out work?
I'm trying to think where we did it, and I think it was in Atlanta. I don't remember, but basically what they did was they had Weber signed and they had Benny signed. So they flew me in. We sat in a room. They put I believe it was the Michigan race on a monitor. They all gave us headsets and okay, call the race. I mean, I was completely a fish out of water. I'm like, okay. So I think what they liked was, that I wasn't afraid to say things or, kind of, called it like I saw it. And yeah, they after the we called half of the race. I remember, I think it was Sam Flood who was in the booth with us, and Jeff Benke, and they just said, hey, are you willing to do that every week? Are you willing to call it that way every week? And I said, sure. I needed a job. I mean, I needed a paycheck, and and it was like, okay, I'm committing myself to this deal, which is going to basically take me out of a race car. But when you got a family and you got those things to worry about, it was like, okay, well, maybe this is the direction I need to go in. And that's how I basically ended up. I mean, it was, I don't know, you guys know who Calvin Fish is? Calvin Fish.
Yeah. We're IMSA guys. We know who Calvin Fish is.
Okay. So Calvin is actually the one, I was just going to, I believe, Texas, at a place in Texas. And Calvin called my brother and said, hey, NBC's trying people out. You ought to, call your brother and have him call Benny. So I literally landed in San Antonio, and I called up Penny Parsons, and I said, "Hey, what's up?" And he said, "Yeah, we're doing this." He said, "We run through about 10 guys." He said, "Are you interested?" And I'm like, "Well, I'll give it a try." And he said, "Well, get your butt to," I think it was Atlanta. And I literally went back to the ticket counter and got an airplane ticket to do the tryout because they were only doing one more day. And that's kind of how it all worked out.
And that first year, what was that like? Because obviously you said you're a fish out of water, and just going to the tracks and now having to look at things as a broadcaster. But you were just in a car last year, so you're bringing so much to it. And then talk about that. Then I'll tell you what my favorite call is from that year. But
to be honest with you, it sucked because I wasn't ready to get out of the race car. So it was hard to go to the racetrack, watch the races, talk about the guys you've been racing against all those years. It was a difficult transition for me. There's no doubt about it. But the more I got involved with it, that group, that first core group that we had at NBC and TNT, we had so much fun together away from the racetrack. I mean, we had epic dinners, and we would go to the go-kart track, or there was always things that we did as a group that made it so much fun. And once we got into that, I was enjoying the heck out of it. I really did like it because I really liked everybody I was working with, and we had a great time. And so I kind of like, okay, this isn't such a bad deal. And I was still getting to drive some Xfinity races, did some stuff with Mr. Clean, and messed around.
Yeah, we're going to ask you about that too. That's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was still driving, and I'm still driving to this day. I'm still doing some road racing and some historic stuff, and the VROC series, which is the Vintage Race of Champions, which has been a blast because you get all the X Cup drivers and IndyCar drivers, Formula One drivers, you name it, and really cool. I'm driving a '70 Boss Mustang. And we're having a blast, and it's all for charity. But I mean, I'm having as much fun now as I ever had. But the Xfinity deal kept me in the car, which was important to NBC and TNT to try. You got to try to stay as current as you can when you're doing a job like that, because these cars change. Everything changes so much. From year 1 to year 3 or year 4, tires, cars, whatever. Everything everything's different. So it was good that I was doing a little bit of driving to at least stay current with things and the track conditions and stuff like that.
I remember in 2005 when you ran Kevin Harvick's car at Watkins Glen, I remember watching the qualifying, and I think they said you had 2 practice laps that race. And then you qualified the car.
I don't think we even did that.
Or you might not even have practiced. You qualified 17th.
Yeah, that's
just your veteran road car savvy? Like what?
Well, I knew the track. Yeah, I knew the track. It was disappointing because we lost a transmission like on the first or second lap out. I never got a hard lap in the car at Watkins Glen. And I know we had some problems with the tranny, and we never got any practice. So yeah, actually my first hot lap that weekend was my qualifying lap. Yeah. And it doesn't matter how much road racing experience you have. It's like, okay, I'm going to drive this thing down in here, and I have no idea if it's going to stop, turn, or do whatever. But it worked out.
Yeah, that's one of our favorite races ever. So we do a segment we call Strange Starters when we review a race of all the weird guys. That one's got like 25. That's our favorite, one of our favorite races of all time. But I'll tell you what my favorite call was, Wally, and then James probably has one as well. But there's a call from Watkins Glen in 2001 on the first lap when they're going into the bus stop, and Benny Parsons calls Robbie Gordon Mike Skinner. And you say, "It's Robbie Gordon, you big dummy."
Mike Skinner's picked up 1 spot on the start.
That's Robbie Gordon, you big dummy.
Mike Skinner, Robbie Gordon, that's right.
He'll be back to Mike next week in Michigan.
Then I'll be correct. I'm just a week early.
That's my favorite call ever. Like, that's just the dynamic between you guys. You could tell you guys were having fun up there,
Yeah. Benny was he was such a joy to be around. Period. And I go back to talking about those dinners and stuff that we had, and all the stories and the history and everything. But yeah, that was always NBC and TNT's motto is, listen, you guys got to call a race like you're sitting on the couch eating pizza drinking beers. That's the way they wanted it done, and that's the way that works. And Benny was one of those guys. I mean, he was just the most humble guy you would ever meet, and he was so generous. He never tried to steal anybody's thunder or anything like that. I mean, he was, he was really a giving person, and I enjoyed those days working with him. And we had a lot of good times together.
I mean, I can't not hear a Benny Parsons story that doesn't end positively. It seems like he's so impactful. I wish I could have met him at least once in my life just to have known that. You spoke to the fact that even while you're in the booth, you're still driving. You drove in Grand Am. You drove in the Rolex 24 in 2002, 2005, 6, and 7. You drove Pikes Peak in 2006, and you won in the open wheel class. Now, I love Pikes Peak. That is the greatest test to me of what you can do with a machine. Talk to the fans about what goes into that, the preparation, the practice week, and all the way up to setting trial run times.
Well, Pikes Peak, out of everything I've ever done, everything I've ever raced, every place I've ever raced, was probably my favorite thing of all times, because it's so insane. It's like, here, get in and just drive as hard as you can without dying. Basically, is what you're doing at Pikes Peak.
Yeah.
The car that I drove, my brothers, I don't even know how many times my brothers won Pikes Peak. He's really good up there. And, I had an opportunity. He had a newer car. I had an opportunity to drive his older car. And you don't get any testing. You don't really get much testing up there. They'll have a couple of test sessions, but you only run sections. Mm-hmm. You never run the whole road until it's race day.
Right.
So
it's a public road.
Yeah. So you'll run maybe 3 miles one day and 5 miles one day. Then you run the top, and you got to kind of all put it together. And we had a lot of problems that week. I didn't, I never ran the top section. We had an engine go out, and so you lose a day of practice. I didn't know where I was going. You can drive that road as many times as you want in a rental car. It looks totally different when you're hauling butt up there. Mm-hmm. So it was the team did, they were really good. They'd run up there year after year after year. So I was really the new guy. I was the rookie. And I remember the race day, it was snowing, and the road from about halfway up, this was all dirt then, 90% dirt, was just terrible conditions. So I remember we were rolling up, and I was ahead of my brother. My brother was quick time, so he started, last, and I was ahead of him. And Paul's so good on that road, I'm like, he's gonna beat me. So I walked over to him right before I got in the car, and I said, "Are you doing anything with your wings?" And he's like, "No, I'm not touching anything." I'm like, "Okay." So I walked up to my guys, and I told my guys, I said, "Crank as much front and rear wing in this car as we can get." And if you look at our cars, I mean, the rear wing is a garage door. They're huge. But I figured, because the road was going to be so bad, I was going to try to get as much down on the downforce as I could. And I rolled the dice, and it worked. I think I beat my brother by like 2 seconds. It wasn't by much. He's been wanting me to come up ever since to run again, but I won't, because I'm like, hey, last time I was there, I beat you. I'm good. But the Pikes Peak hill climb it's really a special deal. Now that it's all paved, it's a different animal.
We're gonna ask you about, do you like what it's become now with Romain Dumas taking a Volkswagen prototype car up the hill?
No, and I've had some opportunities to run it while it's pavement. Your margin of error now is smaller because it's pavement. When it was dirt, you can really drive the car with the throttle, and when you're on asphalt now, you're going so much faster that there's no margin for error. You screw up a little bit, you're going off. So I'm not saying I would never do it again, but when it was dirt, it was fun. It was a lot of fun. And, I say that there are some places there you don't want to look off. I mean, you really don't. There's a corner up towards the top. I remember my brother was trying to help me pick out, rocks and stuff and try to, because I didn't know the top part of the section. And he pulled off and he goes, have you ever, he says, let's take a look. So he pulled off to the side and we walked to the edge. And I mean, I'm not kidding. It was 1,000 feet straight down, no guardrail or whatever. And I was actually pissed off at him because I'm like, you just cost me 5 seconds right here. Because now all I'm going to be thinking about is this spot on my run. There's some crazy, crazy drop-offs up there. But the fun thing about Pikes Peak is all the different cars and all the different classes and stuff that run up there. It's really pretty interesting. If you're a car guy, you'll see it all.
I've never had an opportunity to go as of yet, but hopefully soon. Once life returns to normal, we'll be able to go places and do things.
Yeah.
But the other one-off I wanted to ask you about is set the stage. 1996, NASCAR Suzuka Thunder in Japan. You got to tell us about that because there's so little online about it. What was that like to fly the cars over to Japan and race on, unfortunately, like the short course? I wish they'd done the whole Grand Prix circuit. But,
It was still fun. It was a fun track. That was definitely a special deal. And I remember we were one of the teams that were like one of the first teams over there. So we spent almost a week there. Prior to the first practice. And I remember they had a go-kart place there that we all went to. And after about the third day, they had no go-karts left. We had a bunch of us they were not ready for us. They were polite go-kart drivers. And here we bring a bunch of guys from the South. Well, we pretty much wrecked everything. But Suzuka was, what was so unbelievable about it was the response we got from the fans. I mean, this was something that, this Formula One was really, is really big there. Suzuka, that's their deal. When we showed up, there was tons of people there and they treated us great. We had a blast there. It was definitely a fun deal at Suzuka and we got to see some things and I mean, it was for a guy like me, man, that was a free trip to Japan. That was awesome. I'd love to go back there because I really enjoyed it. I didn't get to see enough. The race, it was fun. It was good. We had a lot of good guys there and it really went off without a hitch. I mean, other than unfortunately, trying to think of the pace car driver's name that NASCAR forever.
He died of a heart attack.
Robbie and I were there. I mean, we basically were the guys that pulled him out of the car and trying to, revive him on that. Outside of that, it was a great experience.
I mean, and something too about that, we saw a lot of extracurricular activities from that, obviously going to the Honda Museum, go-kart racing, like you said. Did you ever try drifting while you were there?
I didn't try drifting while I was there. Now I got an opportunity to drive a drifting car in Texas one time at the Cooper Tire Test Track, and I was doing a piece for NBC because NBC was doing the deal with the Detroit Auto Show. Part of the deal was covering the drifting stuff, so they sent the camera crew out, and I did a segment on drifting. Holy cow, that was fun! I mean, it was just this. I was driving, I think it was a Nissan. It had 2 turbochargers on it. I mean, getting sideways in the thing was not hard at all. Mm-hmm. And so that was really a lot of fun. It gave me an insight on what those guys do and what that's all about. Got a lot of respect for them. But those cars were big horsepower.
Oh yeah, like that's honestly the only nerdy aspect about me is like if I drive, that's my form of driving is drifting. So I have a low horsepower car, so I understand what it's much more fun when you have high horsepower because you don't have to go into the corner with like 50 extra miles per hour to try to slide it and send it sideways. Just kick it up like a NASCAR basically.
Yeah, this thing I was driving was, I mean, I think we went through 3 sets of tires in a day. I mean, we were just burning them off. But hey, sideways is fun, whether you're going 25 or 125. So it
It's all
doesn't
about the
matter.
smiles per mile right there.
Exactly.
So your broadcasting career, though, Wally, two other things I want to talk about is, first off, who's your favorite Wally's World guest? If you had to pick one, because there are some memorable ones over the years. People who screamed the whole time, people who thought you weren't going fast enough. It was fun.
I tell you, one guy that thoroughly enjoyed it was Quentin Tarantino at Bristol. He was totally into it, and we had a good time. I've had from one spectrum to the other. I had people bail out as soon as I fired that thing up and said, "Nope, not doing it." And I've had people that never said a word during the whole Wally World thing, and then I would see them 20 minutes later at the TV compound, and they're just so animated and man, I'm like, where was that when we were in the car? A lot of different reactions from people. I think probably, I've had some guys that were the biggest scaredy cats. The women were all, go for it. They couldn't go fast enough. It was fun. So we got, a lot of good guests, a lot of guests that embraced it and we had fun with it. And like I said, I had a few that bailed. Cameras were rolling, they were strapped in, and as soon as I fired that thing up, they unhooked the belts and jumped out the window, and they're like, not doing it. So it was fun.
Would you take the 2-seater ride with Mario Andretti?
Sorry?
Would you take the 2-seater ride with Mario Andretti if it was offered to you?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I always thought...
I would take the 2.
Yeah. No, sorry, go ahead.
I would do it with any of those guys. I went with Tony Kanaan when we were doing some IndyCar races. I went around with Tony Kanaan. Those cars are so awkward. The 2-seater IndyCars are on a road course they're like a bus. Probably be a lot more fun. I'd like to get in one at Indy or Michigan or somewhere like that. But I believe we did it at a street course, maybe Houston or something like that. And it's a lot of car to be going around at any speed on a street course.
And especially that one. That's a very rough street course.
Yeah.
That was the other thing I wanted to ask about, though, was the when you're calling Champ Car near the end of your broadcasting career, and just sort of the transition to that. It's obviously like you're a pro broadcaster at this point, so you're just calling a different type of racing. But what was it like calling a sport where like everyone's looking at their watch, like, so this is gonna die any minute now? This sport. Like, what was it like in the paddock and just being around Champ Car at that time?
Well, around the paddock was great. Because I was, again, I really grew up with IndyCar and a lot of the people in the paddock and stuff. So I felt at home in the paddock. I think the struggle for me was, I hadn't been in an IndyCar in years. I only raced in 3 or 4 IndyCar races. So I basically took myself out of the IndyCar deal. I just said, listen, you've got other people that can do a better job than me. I don't want to do this anymore because I'm not current enough in these cars to be able to speak intelligently about, what the drivers are doing, what tools they're using, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, that was probably the hardest thing for me when I was calling the IndyCar races, was just not having the experience in those cars to be able to relate to the fans what's going on, but I've always been a big IndyCar fan, and I think I think the racing is really good, and I enjoy it. But at that time, the racing was still pretty good. We were only doing I was only doing a handful of those, so I wasn't doing them all. When you're not there every week, staying on top of it and doing it, it's difficult because things change from week to week. And if you're gone for 3 or 4 races and then come back and do another one, you've missed out on a lot. So,
and speak to that too with like, you ran that partial Xfinity schedule. What's it like, taking a couple weeks off, jumping back into a car when you're competing against other drivers who are doing this on the week-to-week schedule, having the lingo and the communication with the team? Is that a real struggle for you to really like jump over that hurdle?
Not too much. If you're referring to like the Sapco year.
No, more or less like those auto wash years.
Tommy Baldwin, like Busch Series.
Oh, okay.
Stuff, yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's always hard to be out. When you're in the car every week and you're doing it, and you become programmed. You're like a machine, and anything that happens in the car or whatever, it's automatic. You don't even think about it. When you're out and then go back in, even though I've been doing this stuff my whole life, you've got to work up to it. You have to get back into the groove of it. And it's funny. I tell people, I don't care who you are. When you go to Bristol, even if you're racing every year, when you go to Bristol and you take those first 5 or 6 laps, you come in, you look at any driver the first 5 or 6 laps, they're going, because you got to get used to, I'm going really fast on this half mile, and it takes your breath away. So it is hard to be out of it and go back in it and race against guys that didn't miss 4 weeks or 5 weeks or 8 weeks of racing. It's really hard to do that. With Tommy's stuff, Tommy Baldwin's stuff was good. They gave me really good equipment, and that made that transition a lot easier. When you're jumping in good stuff, it's definitely easier. When you're not, then you start banging your head against the wall. It makes it harder for everything.
And the last thing I really want to ask you about is, so I don't know if you've been following, I assume you still watch the sport on a regular basis or no?
I'm a casual. I do not sit down and watch a race from green flag to checker flag anymore. I think, I definitely stay current with what's going on, but yeah, I'm not into it as once I was when I was your guys' age. Like I said, I follow it. I follow Formula One. I follow IndyCar. I follow a lot of different sports, but I'm not a diehard. I'm going to watch this race this weekend.
So Brad Keselowski this weekend said that NASCAR should adopt a system in which you can demote a driver out of the Cup Series if they get involved in a lot of accidents and cause a lot of accidents. Like, how you have to get a Cup license to be allowed to race in Cup, but he thinks, like kind of in F1 with the super license, how you can kick guys down a level if they're not as good, because there was a very bad crash caused by a very inexperienced driver in the Texas race. What do you think that would work in NASCAR? Because obviously, speak to like when you were driving, guys didn't come into Cup till they were like 30 or 35. Now we have 19-year-olds in the Cup Series, and a lot of them buying rides in bad cars. So, because we've kind of got to a pay driver level like IMSA now. So, kind of compare that to back when you were racing, though.
Well, I think you have to nip that one in the bud before you let somebody on a racetrack. And I don't know what the rule is. I don't know how NASCAR does it. But, normally before you get a NASCAR license, they're going to look at your credentials and say, okay, there's times where they've not let drivers drive on super speedways because they didn't have the experience in a Cup car. Like, get more experience on a super speedway, and then we'll let you run at Daytona and Talladega. So as far as demoting somebody after they're there, they shouldn't be there if they're not qualified. That's how you eliminate all this. I don't know much about this guy's background or anything. And, listen, it's tough. And as a driver, I'm sure he's getting tons of criticism, which he doesn't need, because there's nobody that is criticizing himself more than himself. As drivers, we take things pretty hard when we make mistakes and do things and stuff like that. But as far as demoting somebody, no, I don't. I'm not into. I don't agree with that. I just think maybe they should do a little bit better job before they're handing out licenses, to compete in the Cup Series. But again, I don't know much about the situation. The guys out there trying, and sometimes sometimes you have an opportunity to run some Cup races. Maybe you want to run some truck races and some Xfinity races. But if you've got a sponsor and they're not interested in doing it and they're saying, hey, you need to go run some Cup races, guess what? I'm going to go run some Cup races.
This is what people don't understand. Is like, it's probably not his fault that he's there.
Absolutely. It's like, well, let him go back. He should go back and do this or do that. Okay, well, if the guys paying the bills are saying, no, we want you to run here, not here, what are you supposed to say? Yeah. So, listen, everybody's got an opinion, but I'm sure when you're put into a situation and somebody says to you, hey, you want to run this race, or if you don't, we'll get somebody that will, you're going to go ahead and run it.
100%. So finally, Wally, what are you up to now? What are you doing with your time nowadays? You enjoying yourself? You enjoying, life after racing?
I try to enjoy life my whole life. I mean, I pretty easygoing. I do a lot of traveling. Well, I used to do a lot of traveling, not this year.
Yeah.
I got 3 great kids, and I'm involved in some real estate projects, here in Florida. And I'm just, kind of enjoying myself. I'm doing, like I said, doing some of the racing. I don't think we're going to do any this year, unfortunately, with all this COVID mess, but doing normally, like last year, I think I did 7 or 8 weekends with SVRA and VROC, and enjoying myself, because the guy I'm driving for, John Cloud, he's got an ex-Rusty Wallace car. He's got a 70 Boss Mustang. He's got an ex-Kevin Harvick Winston West car. He's got an old IMSA GTO car, which is my favorite car. That thing just flies. It's an animal. So any given weekend, when I go and say I'm racing this weekend, I'm driving 4 or 5 different cars every weekend. And so I'm getting my fill with all that and having a blast. And John's a great guy to be with. And we won the championship last year in the VROC series, which was cool. I didn't even know they had a championship. After the last race, which was at VIR, I'm getting off the podium and they're like, no, stick around. We got some more stuff to give you. And I'm like, well, what do you got? What's going on? He's like, well, you won the championship. I've got the biggest trophy I ever won and like a $5,000 watch. And I'm like, I'm glad I didn't know that. I would have screwed it up. I knew that was on the line.
Yeah.
I'm like,
there's a championship? What?
This is exactly what I said. So, but yeah, no, just, stuff like that. Doing, I got some buddies down here in Florida, and, we try to do as much fishing as we can and pig hunting and, goof off stuff like that. So yeah, no, things are absolutely pretty good.
The final question.
Well, let me know whenever you run HSR, a Classic 24, a Classic 12. I'd love to see you out there on the high banks again.
Okay. Yeah.
But the final question, Wally, speaking of the 24, the Grand Am Daytona prototype, awesome car or biggest pile of crap ever?
Depends on what year. The last one that I drove was a turd. There's no horsepower. Now, I got to drive 962 Porsches. I got to drive the Hendrick Corvette with a V6 with twin turbos. I got to drive the prototype cars when they were rockets, 1,200, 1,500. That Hendrick Corvette, I don't know what the horsepower was, but when you put your foot down, your vision was blurred for the first 2 or 3 seconds. That's how fast that car was. Those cars were fun to drive. They were animals. The last prototype car I drove, and it's been a while, they were. It wasn't like they were bad cars, but they needed another 400 or 500 horsepower, and I believe that goes across the board for any kind of racing, as far as I'm concerned. You want IndyCar and NASCAR, and you want it. Everybody's like, oh, how do we make it better? How do we make it better? Yeah, give them enough horsepower where they got to use the brakes. Then you'll see who can drive and who can't. And I think the cars now, the IMSA cars now, the prototype cars, those cars look like they scoot. And I haven't driven, one like that, and I don't know what the horsepower was, but I think those cars, they're pretty fast.
Yeah, a lot of downforce too. They stick to the road like crazy. Like not even as much as like an LMP1 car in WEC, but like they can go around Sebring unbelievably fast.
So, well, I got 1 million laps at Sebring, and the two toughest corners in like a prototype car at Sebring is the last corner and turn 1 because it's so bumpy. And I watched some of the Sebring race last weekend, and those cars were jumping off the ground coming through there. And literally, that's how it is. I mean, I remember driving prototype cars through that last corner at Sebring, and again, it was so rough. You're going so fast, and it's so rough. You can't see. I mean, literally, you can't see for a while until you get 3/4 through the corner, and then you're going, okay, there's the wall. Now I know where to point it. Turn 1, you're flying. That's one of my favorite corners out of any racetrack because it's so fast and it's blind. You've got to get right on that inside concrete and hug it, and there's no room for error there. And those cars are going through there really, really fast. So I give those guys a lot of credit because it's a handful.
Well, Wally, thanks so much for your time, man. Thanks for talking to us about all the old times racing and broadcasting. And you mentioned Casey Mears was at your place, and we want to get him. So if we ask him, just vouch for us. Tell him that we're legit and that we're not, some nobodies. Yeah. So yeah.
Okay.
Appreciate
I enjoyed talking with you guys. It was fun, fun to go back and talk about some of that stuff. So, great. Anytime.
And if you're ever aching on your hunts, let us know if you need any Blue Emu, our sponsor. We'll hook you up. We'll send you some. So let us know if you ever need any. All right? Great for easing those pains when you're out hunting. All right, take care, Wally. We appreciate it.
All right, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you.